Please welcome our next speaker, Bruno.
Well done.
Remark.
All right. Hi. So let's. I don't know how much time I have, so I hope there's going to be questions and time for questions later on. 25? Okay, good. So yeah, I've been at Metaverse Summit this weekend, and I've never been more convinced that there's massive problems with metaverses after being there. And some of these we're going to talk about today and possibly discuss in creative ways and how to solve them. But generally, I consider them quite deal-breaking problems that completely, well, dismantle the idea of metaverses today. And you'll see why. So just briefly about me, I'm Bruno. I founded Remark. We make the NFT 2.0 standards, an open source set of standards that is the final evolution of NFTs that can do anything your NFT project might want to do. It makes every collection that launches on these standards mutually compatible with every other collection that existed in the past and every collection that will exist in the future. And by making this possible, it kind of solves a lot of these problems. Well, parts of them, as we'll see. I started in Ethereum in 2015 and worked on Ethereum 2.0 for a while, and then on Polkadot and Kusama, and then finally Remark, which has also evolved significantly since its initial version. So before we get into it, we have to discuss what a metaverse actually is. And there are many definitions of this. Most of them rely on whatever the person selling it is selling. So usually that definition will be adopted to whatever's in the bottle, whatever's in the packaging. And for example, there was this one guy at the Metaverse Summit who connected a trampoline to some Peloton handles, and it gave you points for jumping around, and he called it a metaverse. And apart from making me want to die a little, I felt like this major disconnect between people who are trying to actually build a metaverse and people who are trying to actually build a metaverse. So a metaverse is, this is my definition, and yours may vary, but this is the one that I'm going by according to the definition by Neil Stephenson in the original book, Snow Crash, and it's kind of adapted to that. So a metaverse is a community-modifiable virtual environment in which reasonably unique representations of and digital scarce representations of a real human can easily interact with each other and then own that experience. And there are some important phrases in this that really have to be hammered in. So it has to be community modifiable. You must be able to modify it as a community member. If it's static and in control of the team that created it, it's not a metaverse. It has to be digitally scarce representations. You cannot be able to log into 50 different instances of the same metaverse at the same time and play in 50 different locations with the same avatar. Or worse yet, sell the NFT you used to log in while you're playing, and nothing's going to happen. I will leave it to your imagination to think which current metaverses allow this. Spoiler alert, all of them. And a human should easily be able to interact with other humans, which means it should not encounter UX barriers. It should not feel a headache when trying to communicate with others on these platforms or interact with the system on these platforms. This is also generally a blockchain problem, a huge UX problem. And last but not least, that human should permanently own their experience of this interaction. That human should not lose the invested time and attention when that metaverse games, at least current metaverses, are just multiplayer games replace. That's it. That's all they are today. Just multiplayer games running on the same centralized infrastructure by the same centralized teams, going down with everything else that goes down at the same time, and just using your NFT to log you in. Doesn't even use the NFT to make sure that you can stay logged in. Collabland, which is a bot that you can use to allow access to certain Discord rooms to people with NFTs, is more of a metaverse than most metaverses today, because that'll kick you if you sell the NFT. Metaverses will not. Problem two is that they're hard to play. You can't really expect the next billion, trillion, gazillion users to come on board if they need to sit down behind a computer or don a VR headset or use WASD for movement in a 3D space. You sure as hell can't expect them to install custom software on their machine just to run your game. The next million, billion users are not native gamers. They're not comfortable with this. They're not going to do this, and we are not going to onboard them with this. So this just doesn't work. And if you introduce into all of this the added mess of wallets, transactions, and passwords, and signing, and waiting for confirmations, nobody will use this. It will either be a fake metaverse, which doesn't have transactions, or it's going to be an unused one. Problem three, they are very hard to build and plan for Web3 teams. Shocker, Web3 teams are actually terrible at designing economies. Most of them try to follow the DEX model of introducing a new token and just showering their users with it, the so-called play to earn. And as we all know from DEX operations, all of those tokens trend towards zero over time because they have no utility, no value. They're just used as a bribe token to get people to come over and stay there. By definition, all of these games that do the same thing, vampire attack each other because they are still all competing for the same 200 players that we have in the metaverse today. Just the other day, there was a report that Sandbox and Decentraland combined have 1,000 users per day active. Kind of disappointing for projects of those valuations. So Web3 teams are horrible at designing long-lasting economies. They are exceptionally horrible at game development because most of them are neither gamers nor game developers, and they just jumped on the metaverse bandwagon because it was trendy. So what you end up with is teams that raise exorbitant amounts of money based on Unreal Engine 5 demos and then run into a wall when they're supposed to deliver a AAA experience, and then they wonder why it's not working out. There is a reason why in traditional game development, a team will not even tell you that they're building a game until they're 3 years in and have discarded 30 prototypes because they weren't fun enough. That's how things work there. You do not sell a game by just making it. You sell a game by iterating, making sure it's good, and being self-critical, not by raising before you even have the idea fleshed out completely. In most cases also, it takes an entire team to develop these sort of things. The economy itself needs a team of economists that know what they're doing. There are entire companies specializing in designing game economies with sources and drains, that's basically supply and demand of in-game resources, that can simulate your economy years and years in advance. Very few projects use this. And then you have all of this extra overhead of lore writing, map drawing, level design, character design, rendering, and all that to end up at a mediocre game, which is not community modifiable at all. Because you can't expect your community to be that same level, that same caliber of game developers so they can just make a new model that will be added to your game. And problem number 4 is that they are hard to build and plan and trust for game development teams. they do not like NFTs, and they do not like wallets. Wallets, fair enough, because you don't want your possibly hard-to-play game to be even harder to play by introducing a wallet, and by introducing passwords, and by introducing all of that complexity. So, of course, they don't want this. But more importantly, there is the very valid argument of game development teams that why would you use NFTs? If you have a character skin in Fortnite and you turn it into an NFT, it's not like you can take it into Counter-Strike. It's not going to work. You have a different rigging system. You have a different rendering system. The engine is different. It can't work. No, it can't. And you also can't go to the moon on a horse because you're using the wrong tech for the wrong things. So to fix this, you use a better standard that does allow you to do this, that does allow you to have different files to move between the games and to load the contextually correct file based on what game it's loaded in. But they're not aware that this exists. And so this is our problem as much as it is theirs. They're just not aware that the solution is out there and has been in production for a very long time. Well, relatively speaking. So how do we solve all of this? What do? Well, there is a miracle cure, and it's called the CipherMod SDK. And it can do a lot of things, the CipherMod SDK. It can do many, many wonderful things, but not any of these. So it can help you create forward-compatible collections of assets that are automatically backwards compatible as well with anything that has existed in the past. But it also helps you create these NFT-based operating systems, so to speak, that will never go down, that let you keep your experience in the NFTs themselves, and that uniquely allow a decentralized metaverse to actually exist. No servers, no backends, and definitely no loss of progress when that metaverse inevitably goes down. And why do I say that it inevitably goes down? Because right now, every new game, every new project, every single NFT collection to metaverse project, everything that comes out is vampire attacking everything else that already exists. They're mutually attacking each other for the same small player base. We are killing each other before we even brought in the critical mass of people that we need to survive from, a bigger audience. And so when you're running on a centralized server, and when your players stop feeding money into the system because they've been siphoned off by another project, your server becomes too expensive to maintain. You will shut it down. And if you're using archaic NFT standards, your progress goes down with them. It all goes away. You've gained nothing. All of metaverses today, all of Web3 gaming today is a joke. And CipherMod, which is an extension of this remark technology of our NFTs, makes this uniquely possible, solves these particular problems. So how do we build an SDK? Well, this SDK is a set of open source plugins. It's very much like Substrate for metaverses. And Substrate, as you might know, is the framework that most chains in Polkadot are based on. And how that came to be was Parity were building Kusama and Polkadot. And as they realized that there are some commonalities when building these chains and the other chains they built before, they realized, all right, there's some common problems here, so let's abstract that into an SDK. And then let's rebuild what we had before using the SDK, build on top of that, abstract these new solutions again into the SDK, rebuild again using that new SDK. And so you have this feedback loop of building which results in Substrate being used to build Polkadot and Kusama, which are being used to build Substrate. The same applies to this. There are currently 2 games being built using this SDK, and they could not be more contextually different. The 2 games were Fallout World and Skybreach. As Remark, we're building Skybreach, and as Fallout, we're building Fallout World. We realized that we were solving the same problems a lot. And so it made sense to team up. And we teamed up to make this SDK, this open source SDK, available to everybody, which is kind of your way to get forkable games. If you think about it in terms of current game types and templates, you have 4 types of games right now on any major console. You have sports games, driving games, shooters, and over-the-shoulder action RPGs. Outliers are very, very rare. Mostly, 90% of it is just reskinned those 4 types. Well, what if it were very easy to just fork one of those games, modify the textures and lore, and you get a new game, which is what basically all of these studios are doing. That's basically what this enables. There's 4 hours of total content across all of Sandbox, and it's all just platformers jumping around. Nobody's playing Sandbox because nobody's building in it, and nobody's building in it because nobody's playing it. It's very difficult to build in. With CypherMod, you end up with an SDK that is able to deploy new game-like experiences for existing and new metaverses. So you would be able to fork a decentralized minigame for Sandbox very easily, modify it to your liking, and deploy it to Sandbox in a few clicks into land that you own. This proliferates the content available there and grows the player base. In regards to Fallout World and Skybreach, so Fallout World is this 3D MMORPG where you level up not by playing the game, but by being a good Web3 citizen. Your activities on-chain and off-chain are oracleized into Soulbound 2.0 NFTs, which are this remark tech that you have, where you have NFTs inside of other NFTs, but the NFTs that you've put inside them are non-transferable. So they're locked to the avatar. They're locked to your avatar. And this, I think, is a brilliant way of gamifying, of bringing in the next billion users to crypto, the next generation of users to crypto through extreme gamification, which young folks react to very positively. And Skybreach is the world's only decentralized metaverse where everything is on-chain because everything is in the state of the NFTs. If I have an avatar and a plot of land, the only way for that avatar to be in the plot of land is for me to send that avatar into the plot of land. The land contains the avatar. And this is on-chain. You don't need a backend checking for me cheat spawning across the map. So all of your state is in there. And as you play with your avatar, you end up with a system of ownership of experience, which we've talked about before. So the community modifiable aspect is handled by the forkability of CypherMod. You can easily fork an existing experience. So it's easily community modifiable. To get this character progression system and the ownership of experience, you have the ability to put experience points, which are non-transferable NFTs, skills, which are non-transferable NFTs, even a brain with skill slots, which is a non-transferable NFT, into these avatars. So you have a character progression system. You have an NFT that becomes more valuable every time you stop playing. So not only do you own your experience of having played, so your time doesn't go to waste, your NFT becomes generational wealth. You can pass it on. In 40 years, I can give my grandson my Fortnite character and tell him, here, Billy, go destroy everybody in Fortnite 62. So that's ownership of experience. And we have community modifiable, easy community modifiability. Now, for ease of interactions, we have abstracted this somewhat, and we're still working on this, where you have session keys that are permission for certain types of actions. So when you do need to do transactions, you would, for example, generate from a master key a session key that is used only for movement. This session key is then stored in local storage only, and it doesn't matter if you lose it or if it gets stolen. The worst thing that somebody can do is move you around a little bit. But the game itself, the game environment itself, will be able to just auto-assign transactions that you need to move from area to area. So that works really well. Additionally, metaverses today, if you really want that reach, they need to be hyper-casual. They need to reach the general audiences, and for that, you need really approachable ways to play. You can't have a downloadable client. You cannot expect them to use WASD to move around. You cannot have them in 3D space. If you've ever put a non-gamer in front of a 3D game and gave them the mouse into their hand, you have either 10 minutes of frustration or 10 minutes of laughter ahead of you, because they simply cannot understand how that works. It just doesn't compute. And so you cannot bring non-gamers into this world like this. And pay-to-win games on mobile know this really well. That's the hyper-casual type that you want, but that's not the, but you want this without their greed. And so CipherMod is this all-around toolkit that lets you solve this by having sane defaults. And so this is just some of the stuff that this kind of enables. You have these Soulbound 2.0 NFTs explained here. But in general, one of the biggest perks of this is that by launching in this ecosystem, you get the availability of the global item economy. Since everything you launch is compatible with everything that's been launched in the past, you get assets that are compatible with everything new and everything old. And so why is that beneficial? Well, right now, if you have a traditional NFT system, a project that loses popularity dies. If you have a game where Vikings are chopping trees and people stop playing it, in traditional blockchains or projects, that's dead. That project is dead. Here, a new game can join the ecosystem. That new game can make those access compatible with itself. And so what happens now? Now, the owners of those access have something new and shiny to play with. They can go somewhere else. The game inherited the player base from before. It didn't vampirize it. The project from before got new value injected into it because now those NFTs can be used in more things. This is where the degen score comes into play. The degen score for NFTs, because the more things it's compatible with, the more valuable an NFT is. And the new game also saves time on research and development of these assets. It can just inherit them from another system in a fully decentralized way. And this scales quadratically for every new game that joins this ecosystem. It's a huge pie that grows every time somebody joins, because everything else that already exists is becoming compatible with everything that's coming. So vampire attacks of game to game are no longer a thing. The community grows together because it's all based on one flexible standard that extends the existing ones and doesn't compete. It just makes everything better. The pile of money that's being left on the table right now is truly enormous by AAA publishers who ignore this aspect, who ignore the tradability of skins and cosmetics across these different games. The royalties and commissions alone are mind-boggling. Not to mention the effect this could have on the global creator economy, where anybody can contribute new assets to any existing or new game, because you don't have to talk to the teams anymore to add those assets into those games. And so this is something like how it would look in terms of a wizard where you're selecting what to build. You can have here, so you start by selecting the metaverse you're building for. It can be an existing one or a new one. I can tell it, build me a new metaverse, a new game that's based on Open Diablo, and all the items are NFTs. Or I can tell it, I want to build a bottle collecting game for Sandbox for Coca-Cola. Works all the same. Then you pick your NFT infrastructure. We assume that most people are going to pick Remark because it just does everything that ERC 721 does and more. Then you pick the chain you want to deploy their architecture on. This supports any EVM chain, any substrate chain now, and many more chains coming up. Optionally, you can pick a DID provider to get the bots out of your game. Naturally, most games will not pick this because then they can't say they have 100,000 monthly users. Then you pick the game template. This is an interesting concept. We have a library of game types, templates, and economies that are pre-simulated for you. So you don't need to waste a year on tokenomic research. You have a pre-simulated economy you can just apply to your game. And so you can have something from the leftmost side of the spectrum, like nothing at all, and you end up with basically a Habbo Hotel Online, to the rightmost version that's most extreme, like something like Factorio. All of this pre-simulated for you, and all of this expandable by other people. Everybody can contribute to this, because it's all open source. Every section of this is open source. And then you pick a backend that you want. This can be centralized, like everybody does right now, or it can be Fala, who are our build partners in this CipherMod effort, and provide a decentralized alternative to AWS. Finally, you end. This is not in competition with Unreal Engine or Unity or RPG Maker or anything like that. This is a configurator that passes on all of this configured setup to the compiler that you eventually want to launch. So you can use this to launch an Unreal Engine 5 thing. You can use this to launch a land and sandbox. You can use this to launch for your target platform. That's the beauty of it. We're not actually trying to vampirize anyone else. And so that's basically it. CypherMod is on the way. We just started, but please feel free to visit these links. Sign up for our newsletter on CypherMod.com and stay up to date. It's very fresh, very new, but we are looking to talk to as many game projects as possible, game-related, so that we learn of your problems and the compromises you've had to make, so that maybe we're not hoping to convert you to our tech, but maybe we can build the solutions that the next generation of builders will be able to use to avoid the problems that you guys ran into. Thank you. Do we have time for a question?
Sorry, my mic was muted. Yeah, I think we have time for questions. If you have time to.
Sorry?
If you have time to.
Yeah,
we have a little bit time.
I'd be happy to answer any questions if there's anybody.
So, do we have a question? Okay, sorry. Please.
Hey, Bruno. Thanks for the talk. One of the things that I've seen some, like, not metaverses, but like, blockchain games do is that they don't really think about the block time, right? So if every action that I want to do in the game is a action that will be reflected on the blockchain, it means that I will have to wait, right? If I do, I don't know, buy this item or whatever, I'll have to wait 12 seconds or 17 seconds for that action to actually take place, right? What do you see to fix this problem if you want to make every action in the game sort of like be like backed up in the blockchain? That would really worsen the UX for the user, right? How do you see this issue being fixed?
Yeah, so in most cases, rollups. In most cases, L2s and rollups. So these per block, well, per transaction actions lend themselves really, really well to turn-based stuff, because there you think you can make very easily a civilization game on chain or a Go game or a chess game on chain, and all of that works really, really well. But in terms of more faster interactions and everything, you absolutely need stuff like Boba or Optimism or whatever else you want to use for rolling up the operations and just compiling them into one transaction. So yeah, it's full of trade-offs in terms of where you want to build and what type of game you're building.
Another question?
I'm sorry, I can't see anybody.
No, I try to see too.
Yeah, yell if you want to ask a question.
You see someone that would ask another question? No, you
I don't see anything.
Okay, thank you. Perfect, please.
Hi, merci. I joined a bit late, so sorry if you already answered that question, but I think it's very clear that you have incredible tech, but how will you onboard more people to actually use this? Because I asked sometimes people from Sandbox what they think about your tech and everything, and or people who are gamers, and they were like, yeah, I think Sandbox and all the other ones might have this advantage of just being there early. So what would be your approach to onboard more people?
That's a good question I don't have an answer to. I'm horrible at marketing and outreach, and I would really love it if I could get some help with that. I don't know. So we're talking to many projects. We're talking to L1s. We're talking to, from chains to games to everybody for integrating this. We're trying to help everybody build, and yet still there is this Polkadot moat where we are unable to penetrate beyond it. This is what we're working heavily on right now with our EVM implementation. We want to invade the EVMs and just make ourselves known that way. But it just, I think there's just a lack of hype and stuff. We have not focused at all on hype, only building, and it's definitely biting us in the ass. So yeah, if you have any ideas, mostly we need the community, mostly we need builders, we need people that experiment on this, that build interesting things. So, you know, if you have any aspirations about this, so this is not just for games. It's easiest to explain on games, but this is great for reputational system, for loyalty points, for real estate, for music crafting, for a lot of different things. So anything your team is trying to build, we're trying to get as many use cases as possible. We're getting nothing from this. We're not earning any money from people using our tech. So please come and use it because it's completely like open and we just want to upgrade it for everybody else. So yeah, in short, I don't know. I don't know, but we'll do our best.
Okay, we could pick one last question. If anyone, sure. I don't know. Let me know if you have another question. It will be the last one. Nothing.
Okay,
So thank you very much. And as I mentioned earlier, feel free to connect in the Pillar room.
Hello, everyone. There's a not slight change, but we're hosting a panel right now. Our actual great co-organizer, Benjamin, is hosting a panel on the importance of independent validators. So please welcome Benjamin.
Hi everyone, hi again. So as you can see, we have a few surprises for our panel today. First of all, thank you. So thanks to all of you for joining us today. Unfortunately, we had two of the members who couldn't come. They reached us for personal reasons. But instead, we have the pleasure to have Bruno again with us. Here it is, yeah. So the topic of today is how and why is it important to rely on independent validators for the relay chain especially. We will be also talking a little bit about parachains. So maybe let's start by introducing each of you and have a little bit of your background interested. So ladies first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Park. I lead the protocol team at Figment. We're a validator provider for over 50 different networks. We validate on the relay chain as well as on Moonbeam. And yeah, I'm really glad to be here.
Hi. In terms of validation, we run, as remarked, we run a Kusama validator. We also stake on a centralized exchange. And we run a Moonriver collator.
Hey. So my name is Will, and I have kind of a funny title called Master of Validators. And so I work at ParisDOT and coordinate a lot of things around ecosystem infrastructure. What this means is kind of helping a lot of like validators in the ecosystem actually kind of like get up and running, help them hopefully succeed in actually becoming like fully independent and like self-sustaining. And just in the broader sense, kind of just like coordinate actually just like the things that help kind of run these networks. And so besides this, I also kind of work on a bunch of random things relating to kind of just like products ParisDOT is kind of like working on, and also kind of like facilitating governance. And so to me, I'm just like really passionate about actually just like having these networks work and run, actually kind of like seeing them flourish. And so yeah, hopefully can get into a lot of the things that kind of make that possible.
I'm Jimmy. I'm running the stake node instance validator. I do validation for Relay Chain, Kusama, and Polkadot also, and for parachains, for Astar, Hydra, Kilt, and Shiden also. So with BLD, we are co-founders of Dot Validators Alliance. This is an organization which unites independent validators and try to strengthen our positions in the ecosystem. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, just a few words about me. So I'm Benjamin, as known as BLD. I'm also running a few validators and collators, not much actually, because most of my job is doing DevOps for Astar Network and Logger Network. So I'm pretty used to this stuff too. All right, so let me start with the first one. But the clicker doesn't work.
Check if it's turned on.
Uh-huh.
On the side.
On the side. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's off. My bad. Sorry. All right, so just to introduce the panel, because this, like, the aim of today is mostly to talk about validators, but maybe some of you don't know actually what are validators or what they really are. If you are here, you probably know Polkadot and Kusama are proof-of-stake blockchain. This means that instead of running, large computers who are making hard work and consuming very much energy, like is Bitcoin or still Ethereum right now, Polkadot works with validators with stake attached to them that actually ensures the security of the network. So, yeah, validators ensure the security of the network, so of the relay chain, but not only, also of the parachain, because of this concept that you should have heard about of sharded security. Parachain also rely on the relay chain for the security. What else? Yeah, the job of a validator is mostly verify the information. Of course, Will, feel free to complete what I'm saying. You are the master of validators here.
Yeah, and I guess also just to expand on this a little bit, the role of validators, at least in the context of Polkadot and Kusama, is not just to help run Polkadot and Kusama itself, but just to power the ecosystem kind of in general. And so this is to actually facilitate all these different parachains running as well. And so it's without kind of the relay chain validators, these other chains just kind of wouldn't work as they kind of do today as well. And this is kind of in contrast to some other ecosystems where typically the whole process of actually spinning up a blockchain and kind of getting up and running with this is that people have to kind of bring your own validator set, which it has trade-offs and benefits. In some ways this is nice, but some ways it's also kind of very daunting for a new team trying to get up and running to actually kind of do this themselves. And part of the benefits of Polkadot is that you have this notion of shared security in the sense of all these kind of different parachains inherit kind of the relay chain security, and this security is kind of the financial backing of all the relay chain validators essentially. And to me at least, I think kind of just the role of validators is partly not just the actual technical parts of just getting things up and running and stuff like this, but to me validators are kind of just hyper engaged community participants. And this means it's they're kind of in a bunch of these chat rooms. They're kind of making issues. To me, actually, in a lot of ways, a lot of the most useful tooling is actually built by validators in the ecosystem, and it's also kind of relating to I guess governance participation as well. And so to me, it's kind of validators are a pretty nice kind of credibly neutral, perhaps, kind of entity in the space that can actually help facilitate governance, just because they're kind of have their brand and kind of reputation a bit more known compared to, I guess, kind of regular people. And so I guess I could ask a bunch of these panelists, I guess, what do you think kind of the role of validators is, I guess, kind of besides this? So I guess what do you think kind of makes for a good participant in the ecosystem in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I like to phrase it a lot of the time is that it's stewardship, right? Like a lot of it is if you're providing a space, especially like with Polkadot, since we're all sharing as validators the responsibility for validating transactions on every dependent chain, we're stewarding like something that is intended to be a public good for everything that's attached to that ecosystem. So it's like a stewardship of a common space. You know, so I think in that regard, validators kind of have like a public service role within the Polkadot ecosystem. It's kind of the case for just about any system you have a validator on, but for Polkadot in particular, like the entire ecosystem depends on that role, which is pretty cool, very unique, and also gives us a lot of responsibility as validators to be good stewards and develop good practices, be well involved in things like anywhere from governance to proposing things to building tooling, anything along those lines. So it's that public service role, I think, is like really amplified relative to a lot of other things that happen throughout crypto in general, but is pretty well pronounced in Polkadot, and it's something that like I think is well designed into how the system was built in the first place.
I agree. I would also say that that as a decentralization maxi, I value some other things, but I think that so I would always vote for being off cloud and trying to maximize a decentralized infrastructure, even at the cost of latency. I would sooner like to see a more, you know, less optimized blockchain than one that is running on AWS completely. But I also see validators as kind of these classes in D&D, like you have the barbarians and the paladins and everything. So you have some of them that really care about being engaged in the community, building tools for others, like, you know, building verifiers for runtimes or whatever else. But then you have others that are so spread out across like 100 different projects for staking that they just don't even pay attention to what they're actually staking on. But maybe their infrastructure is so good and so decentralized and so robust that it doesn't matter that they're not actively participating. And so you have these different classes of validators that I think are all very important, unless you're dealing with the case of, you know, a whale that hijacks 30% of the pool and doesn't really contribute back, and that's another problem entirely.
Yeah, I guess maybe you could like skip ahead 2 slides. There's one kind of graphic on this that shows kind of what you were just kind of mentioning of actually kind of like contributing to decentralization. And so for me, this is like one thing that I've been looking into a lot of and just trying to figure out better ways to actually kind of like decentralize these networks and have them be kind of like these very just like anti-fragile kind of things where it's kind of like it doesn't rely on just like if, say, Google goes down or something like that, the network goes down. And so to me, one thing I actually really appreciate about Bruno is kind of like you guys are running nodes like in your office, right? And so this is actually like not too common compared to most of the people. Like most people will use like Hetzner, like OVH, things like this. And to me personally, like I would love to see kind of like more people doing things like this, of like kind of like running things in their home, running things kind of like or just otherwise in like infrastructure providers that aren't as well used. And so as part of like one thing that I'm kind of working on this $1,000 program, looking for better ways to actually kind of like, I guess, quantify this. And so as part of this program, for those that are not aware, it's kind of both Parity and Web3 have a bunch of like funds for both like DOT and KSM. And these funds continuously like nominate a bunch of people in the community that participate in this. And it nominates people kind of based on a bunch of like factors, and so it's kind of like people get kind of like a score based on a bunch of these things. And one kind of factor of the score is kind of relating to, I guess, like location and infrastructure provider. And some of these things are changing and kind of evolving, but the idea here is at least kind of like we want to reward people that actually kind of take the time and effort to decentralize things a bit more. And I think kind of like one kind of like problem that we're just kind of just like growing pains that we've experienced in kind of like the Polkadot Kusama space is like figuring out, okay, like what is actually like necessary for these parachains to operate kind of like from a technical perspective. If we want to have like good block times, if we want to have kind of like things actually like execute as expected, like what hardware do we need? And then also kind of like, is this fine like in terms of like region and location, is like network latency too much or like not enough or things kind of like that. And so I would definitely agree with your point of like, I would actually rather favor kind of like a less optimized network that's like more decentralized. And it's like, if there's like higher block times, I guess like so be it. But to me, there's a lot of kind of benefit in a lot of these things. And so I guess just to ask another question to you all, I guess, like, what are your thoughts on kind of like how to facilitate better like decentralizing of these things? Is there like better ways to actually kind of like get people to maybe like run nodes in their home, or kind of like the convenience of doing things? Because I know a lot of people that I talk to, it's just like the convenience of like running things in the cloud is quite nice. It's like you can tear things up, you can spin things down quite easily. But if you're running like bare metal servers, it's actually like provisioning them takes manual time and effort in some ways. And it's like, if you're doing this like in like your home or office, like you literally have to like build a machine or like physically set it up. And so, yeah, any thoughts on kind of that?
Yeah, about providers, I can say, because I'm pretty much studying the question, especially being like responsible of the Astar collator program. And there is one thing with validators or collators that there is one limit that you don't have with proof of work blockchains, is to have a very stable connection and being constantly online. I mean, that's really the important thing, especially with some consensus being on the, always the same sequence of on a round robin of validators. So it means you need to rely at least on like physically on an infrastructure that is a minimum professional. That is why people usually most rely on cloud providers. But there is difference then in cloud providers, which is basically virtualized servers and bare metal servers that you can have, and self-hosted hardware. And this question is very interesting because I can see around me more and more people who are coming to this to host into a data center that has a stable connection, that has everything, for redundancy, and but put your own hardware into it. And actually, with the last studies we have about our public endpoint providers, we can see that the ones who use their own hardware are much more performant than the one who rely, on virtual machines. So, yeah, I think that's a message that you can give today to the validators, even though, of course, not having the same provider as everyone, because there is an obvious risk of single point of failure in that, but also, interested in, if you want to be there for a long time, if you're here for a long play, contribute to the ecosystem, having your own hardware can be a very interesting investment.
Yeah, but in the same way, like when people are joining validators, like they're starting the journey on the validator set, like mostly they choose the cloud provider, or like the biggest ones, because they think that those are most reliable ones. They have the customer service also, where they can have some help if something goes down with the servers. So this is mostly the case that people like usually pick up the cloud providers, but from like new people who come to this ecosystem. But as BLD said, that the validators who are already well established in the ecosystem are slowly switching to the bare metal clouds, and they're running all instances at home. So this, I think, this will be evolving to this, but I think that. There is a lot of work to do from all of the community, and also from Web3 to encourage people to join the validator set, and to like educate them about not picking up the cloud providers and the biggest ones, but to count on the decentralization. Exactly what Bruno said, like smaller providers, local ones, like the French one. I cannot remember now what's the name. But I know that there is already nice cloud provider in France, and the guys are using this. So yeah, we need a lot of education also about how to join this ecosystem, and we need new people to scale this. So very interesting thing to to come in and to get involved if you are like active contributors to the ecosystem and you're gonna stay here for long. This is a good way to try to be establish the backbone of the blockchains in joining the validator set.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think is not sufficiently emphasized throughout a lot of our space is this the cost barrier to actually being a participant in a lot of the work that's going on. So obviously, if you want this degree of professionalism in people who are acting as node providers, they need to have a level of education, exposure, and also just financial backing to be able to do it. So programs like the 1000 Validator program are like a really good start to being able to like sort of foment that basis. But I think another thing that we could really see is from people who are these professionals, who have been doing it for a while, who have good block history or anything like that, is creating a virtuous cycle of supporting one another, right? So like, and we don't see enough of that. And when it comes to looking at like a new network that's looking to come into being, whether it's on testnet or it's on the Canary network or something like that, there should also be a bigger emphasis from bigger providers to look at ways to support those who don't otherwise have access to validation in the first place, because that's a pathway to get to the point where you can actually become a professional provider. Because otherwise, like if you just have a one-click play validation, you're going to miss out on that professionalism sort of aspect, right? Which is dangerous, and it actually compromises security if you have like one-click play, like any sort of operation like that, because you don't have professionals who have the ability to establish their own set of standards. And then, or okay, you have people who are running it, but then someone else is actually running it for them behind the scenes or something like that. It's the same story. So it's odd because like the main thing you end up needing in a big way is you do need a strong sense of collaboration, which is kind of a little bit unique to our industry, is that people who are competitors also have to support one another, which you don't see in other spaces, and I hope to see us continuing to do in the future. But I don't know what the framework is for that.
Yeah, I guess you could also maybe, there's the slide of independent validator benefits. So here kind of, I would say, especially this kind of like second point, from what I've seen a lot of is just like a lot of the community actually kind of like stepping up to create just like tools and resources for other people to actually kind of benefit from these things. And like one thing that I would love to see more of, or at least kind of like the direction for things, is I guess, at least in the Polkadot and Kusama space, of like Parity and Web3 kind of being less involved and actually kind of like facilitating this like ourselves sort of. And so what I mean by this is that like, if it's, because I think we've kind of seen this like early on, at least in the sense of like when Kusama and like Polkadot first launched, a lot of people have been just like super reliant on like Parity and Web3 to have like tools and like UIs and kind of like documentation and stuff like this. And it's, I guess, like to be expected. And I think kind of like one of the frustrations that like I and many have had is that like, okay, if you want to stake, if you want to like do really anything of like interacting with these blockchains, is that you have to use this like Polkadot.js like interface and stuff. And it's all right, if especially if like you're a developer, you're a technical person. There's a lot of like functionality and features there, but like from a UX perspective and actually kind of like using it like for end users especially, it's kind of just a lot of things, and it's kind of like a bit frustrating to use. And so I think like kind of early on, just because we've had kind of this reliance on these things, other people didn't kind of like build the tools in all these things kind of like as necessary to start. And I guess like one thing that I've seen in other ecosystems is that like usually in something, I guess like the Cosmos ecosystem or some of these other places, usually it's like all the block explorers, all the UIs, the dashboards that people interact with things with. These are all built by like validators, and it's like ways for validators to actually kind of get more exposure in actually kind of doing things. And so one thing I would love to see more of and kind of encourage people to do is actually kind of just be able to kind of like take this upon themselves to kind of create these things and kind of work to actually kind of benefit other people. And so one thing that I've seen recently especially is that like, especially in with this like $1,000 program and a bunch of the people that are participating in it, a lot more people have been doing this recently, which I love to see. It's like someone recently started kind of a web page that, because one thing we're kind of working on is figuring out like benchmarking and figuring out kind of like what specs are needed. And so someone kind of just took the initiative to kind of create this page that's just like, oh, here's what like a Contabo, the performance of this is, like just like community submitted like numbers and things like this. And so this is one thing that I really like to see, and I love kind of people contributing to this. And so one thing that I think like Figment does well is they kind of provide a lot of like tools and resources for people. There's a lot of like kind of things that are built that's just very useful for the community. And so I'd be curious to hear like perspectives on kind of like what kind of role does that kind of like encompass, I guess, or kind of like what I guess where's the boundary of kind of like what people should be doing and what's kind of like more than expected, I guess, or like.
Well, so one thing I also kind of want to point out that becomes very difficult is the reason that people go to Web3 and Parity for help is because you're seen as an authority, right? And so the issue with that is you have a burden of authority as a result of that. You're the people who people turn to because you're the experts on the material. So what really kind of what is probably needed, if that's supposed to be something that's taken as a backseat, is some sort of public repository where everyone contributes to and sees as the new authority. Because if we maintain this idea that like, oh, people will be developing tools continuously and sharing them with one another, you're going to see a fragmentation of information. You're going to see competing documentation with different roads to different solutions, and then potentially you end up with inefficiencies. So if you want to continue to build something that is a useful tool across the board, there also needs to be a distinct level of coordination among all parties who are contributing to it to recognize it as an authoritative, like sort of as an authoritative text or an authoritative resource. And one of the cool things is like, there are actually a lot of, there's a lot of research out there that proves that aligning texts, like things, when you build like an aligning text, it becomes like an aligning force for people who are doing work. I mean, that seems pretty obvious, but when it comes from like an inferential perspective, it is inferred that you are aligned with people if you worked on deciding on your standard practices together. And so in order to move away from being an authority as like a centralizing entity and moving to an authority as a collectively held good, like that's a step that like validators can take a much bigger role in contributing to, or also just like community members can take a bigger role in contributing to. And I don't necessarily think that exists in a big way in a lot of ecosystems, because it's difficult to overcome that exact step, which I mentioned a second ago, which is the production of documentation that is fragmented, and no one deciding on what the authoritative text is.
Yeah, I guess maybe this is perhaps a good segue into this like validator alliance. And so I guess could you maybe explain kind of like what this is and kind of what kind of the role of this might be?
Yeah, totally, thank you. Well, actually, you can switch directly to the Validator Alliance, and we'll enjoy this time also to announce the Validator Alliance DAO. But first of all, what is until now the Validator Alliance? It was made from community members such as Jimmy. We have many ones that all of you know, like the Polka Daughters, like Sig from Criferent, and I'm sorry I'm not citing every one of them, even if we are just 8 right now, was to build something around having a strong community, also strong technical knowledge about validation, and help the community about this. I mean, many things have been done, and also being, that's what we realized after some time, that being a small group, of validators and not extending too much, made us rely, too much on our own time, and we are basically every single one of us is involved in many things, in driving their communities, in running their validators, collators. But yeah, the Validators Alliance being made, to extend to everyone who actually wants to make things right. I don't know if that's a common thing you can imagine, but yeah, that's the idea really that we had, and we realized also it doesn't mean to be only small. We have some people who got involved into it and just started with having one validator, and now they run like 5, 6, 7 validators. And we realized that's not necessarily bad if people do things right, if they if they involve with other validators, basically, to share good practice, to share together how to make it better, how to make it more decentralized. Even if I'm one single entity, I can decentralize actually my infrastructure. And so that's why actually the Validator Alliance will become very soon. We said here from September will become a DAO. So it means every single entity or validator or collator around will just be able to apply, and every decisions inside the alliance will be made just based on a vote. So just a DAO, DAO behavior. Of course, everything will not be all decentralized from the beginning. We are looking for some solution of decentralized governance, but as you know, Substrate is a young space, so we don't have a lot of tools yet, so we have to know what people are doing here and there. So it should first start on Discord, for example, because this is where most of the people are. But yeah, if that's the message we can pass today about the Validator Alliance is please reach out. It will be, everybody will be on holiday during summer, but starting after summer will be a great one, and all decisions will be made with you if you want to involve with the community.
And basically, it was also created, to support each other and to share the good practices. We found some manifesto where we stated that each one of us validators united in the .validators Alliance cannot hold and maintain more than 2 nodes on the network. So this is we are very focused on decentralization, and we are supporting each other. This is to build some community where one can rely on the other one, and we can build the good practice, good practice solutions. We can support each other because I don't know if you guys know, the validators are mostly spending around 80% of their time rushing and trying to get to the active set on, for example, Kusama and Polkadot. Even with 1K validators program, it's really a hard work to maintain your actions focused on taking you and putting you to the active set. So we also, as BRD said, we also are collators for different parachains, and we support each other. We also know that there is a lot of time consuming to maintaining all of those nodes and all those validators with their runtime upgrades and stuff like that. So in the alliance, we support each other, we exchange information, update ourselves about the runtimes and about all of the updates in the Substrate ecosystem. But also, we trying to build the community because almost all of us united now are also community contributors and community managers, and we try to deliver tutorials how to stake, how to maintain the nodes. So this is also important thing, not only for us, for a Validators Alliance, but also for the whole ecosystem, to provide the tools or information to other people who can use this and benefit from it.
I have a question about what you said with 2 nodes per validator. Does that then reduce your incentive enough for you to care less about being more active? Because obviously that cuts into your profits a lot.
No, actually that was not. That was the first idea, that was being...
It came from the Polkadot good practice, where Polkadot practice even in the Polkadot wiki, that they said that running 2 nodes.
I understand the benefit of it. I'm just wondering, for your bottom line, for your, as a validator runner, are you concerned that it's reducing your profit, this approach?
It may reduce the profit, but we are not here for the profits. Of course, for some reason, right, we are for the profits, but I think that we are in this ecosystem for some long time. I'm from 2016, BRD is also around that. So so for us, it might sound strange, but the money is not the best case and the most important thing. That we are builders. I think that we can call ourselves builders and the contributors to this ecosystem. Not like the developers like devs, but we are trying to build this actively, and this is what is our motto or something like that. We try to bring the values to the ecosystem, not focusing on money, but focusing on tech and development.
Yeah, maybe to complete the question, for sure, this kind of rule, will reduce the profit, and it all depends how you see validation, and that's kind of the how to say, the beauty of the thing we saw into the Validator Alliance is that with time going on, we were all different, coming from different, places and horizons, and everybody was doing something different as a job. So, for example, like my situation is I have a full-time DevOps job, so my validators are I have one validator only, but let's say a few collators I have to are mostly support the ecosystem, and I just want to support with one node. But we also have, we have a few members who need to rely on that because many people depend on them now. They are in the active set on some chains, would depend on the stake attached, like on the relay chain, because it all depends on the parachain. And so for them, it's like totally different point of view. They need to maintain a minimum living, but none of the members are, how to say, are looking for optimize the profits. That's right. Yeah.
What stops people from doing that, though?
What stops people from
optimizing a sort of extractive rewards mechanism? There's nothing. It doesn't really seem anything outside of just being like, that's what you should do. That's good practices.
It should be in purely economical perspective. That's hard to say for me because I'm like maybe total opposite of the logic. Like I love to do stuff and even put my own money in it just because I like it. Yeah, but I'm not a good example because some people need to live on it. But optimize means there is. If you want to optimize, you will have to go through a path that will sometimes not benefit the network. And the idea is just to be in harmony with the benefit of the network. It means, it's the same, the role of having two validators. We noticed that for some of our members who need to make a living of it, is like too strict rule sometimes. So I know I will always stick to it because I can afford that, but some can't. And yeah, it's not centralizing everything to have a few nodes in the same network, for example. But yeah, like the best example maybe would be like kind of gaming the system of the relay chain by having a single nomination. You can basically enter the active set with almost a half of what how to say an organic validator would be. So for example, if you need 4K Kusama KSM to get into the active set with one nomination, an independent validator who will have like 100, 200, 400 nominators, he will need like 8 or 10K, something like that. I'm not even sure about the numbers. Will can tell us more about that. But yeah, the whole idea of that is to have a balance between, of course, you need to profit. I know, for example, not everybody can afford, like me, to run some nodes, and like basically I'm losing money on running some nodes. I'm just happy to do it, and I can afford it. And some, need to do things right, but still want to care about the network and decentralization.
But we again coming to the decentralization thing, right? If one node operator like me is running like 50 nodes on Kusama, we are not talking about any decentralization. So each one of us can like run 50 or 100 nodes. It's not a problem. You can buy an infrastructure, rent the infrastructure from cloud provider, put the node online running, and try to get the nominations, right? So if each one of us will go to this way that we can like spam the network with our nodes, we come to the point where this decentralization is compromised, right? So if we get to the point where a lot of new validators come and new collators and new users come to this ecosystem and try to build this together, and there are a lot of new independent validators, we can have this market share of validation slightly bigger and try to build our position in the long term, in the long run, more efficiently all together, supporting us, individual validators, each day, and in the infrastructure development and stuff like that. So it's important to I think that to level this greed, as I can say, to network development. It depends on what are you here for, right? If you are here for the money, go for it, Tiger. If you are here for the network development and some building, I think that this is the better idea to go this way.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely not a question about how to say. Yeah, like Jimmy said, it's not a question about having being small or being really big, but how you combine that with the network. And I think these numbers are pretty talkative. The top 3 of validators of the relay chain are almost 40%. So it means 3 operators basically own 40% of the network. And that's not, that may be in some extreme condition a single point of failure. That's basically, we are living on the network, and so all of the people are here, most of them are making a living of this network. So if you compromise the network, it's also not in your own interest, So yeah, I think that's why, even the second one I think is even a little more representative. But 64% of validators owned by 10 entities. It should be reduced to something reasonable. It doesn't mean having big entities is something wrong, because they are professional. They manage something very well. But you need to mitigate this security issue.
So one thing that I think people that may not know about this validator space or that aren't quite as familiar, just some of the challenges of actually just running validators is partly just actually building a community around yourself. And so running a validator is not just running a node and just doing the technical parts of this, but it's also about kind of just building kind of a brand and reputation, but also kind of cultivating your own kind of community around these things. And so to me, one of the most important parts of community building is just kind of the part of culture sort of. And so to me, it's just crypto and blockchain in general. It's one of the reasons why I work in this industry compared to others is just the culture of things. To me, it very philosophically aligns with the things that I kind of want to see in the world, changes of the world I want to see and things like this sort of. And so as a part of kind of community building and kind of instilling kind of the culture part of these things, I think one thing it's really important to be kind of to try and disseminate the values of things kind of sovereignty, decentralization, permissionlessness, trying to be able to kind of cultivate these values kind of in your community. Because if people actually understand these things and if people actually kind of also align with these ideas, then it's kind of the way that they act and the way that they kind of participate in these networks kind of changes a bit. They might favor, they might not nominate people because they actually would favor kind of decentralization. They might kind of act kind of different than they would other compared to, I guess, just being kind of only driven by kind of money or greed or profits or things like this. And one thing I've seen a lot of at least more recently is just a lot more people that are a lot more interested in actually just cultivating these values, and I love to see this, and people actually care about okay, how can I actually participate in these networks, and how can I actually kind of contribute to running a lot of these things. And I think one thing that I want to kind of steer the community towards more of, and at least kind of facilitate this both for Polkadot Kusama, but also for like parachain projects is just having more kind of like infrastructure being run by the community. And this is not just like validator nodes or collator nodes, but like things kind of like RPC nodes, like boot nodes, like database snapshots, just like getting like all these different things kind of at least more used by the community. And so like Bruno, I'm sure you know kind of like as building like products and things like this, relying kind of like only on like your own back-end infrastructure and stuff is like, it's all right, but it's kind of like a necessary thing in order to actually build good products that people like use, and that's like the experience of actually like doing that is like nice. But the problem though is that like partly it would be like you need to have those things there, but usually it's like only like one entity or people kind of like running these things. And so I would love to move more towards a world where it's kind of just like all the backends for like all these things are kind of just like a load balance endpoint of just like a bunch of community run kind of like instances of like servers and stuff like this. Like.
That's actually what we had last year, I think it was, or the year before. I wrote an RPC, an RFC for the grants for the for a public pool of RPC infrastructure, and I think a team actually did build this node factory. They called it Vedran, and it's done. We can launch this now. I would love to see it in operation. So that's the dream, seeing community-run pools that are treasury incentivized to load balance between community members and distribute the workload for people to access RPC endpoints, rather than, you know, pay $60,000 every quarter to a specific company to run RPC endpoints. We can instead just, you know, fill up those pools and make it happen that way. And I would love to see more of this applied to validators as well. Reward those 1K validators more and get them encouraged. Maybe add some gamification to kind of encourage this home setup architecture, to encourage the individualism of validators, to encourage the standalone nature of these machines through either whatever we're doing with reputational avatars or any other method. I think there's real potential there.
Yeah.
And one important thing is, I think, good to mention that mostly independent and community validators, as I said, are contributors, and they are like trying to build this ecosystem. And thanks to, if projects will turn more into like cooperating with individual validators, for example, in launching their networks and the parachains, this can really give a lot of benefits to communities. Just to give the example, like maybe you know, some of you guys know the ParisDOT community, and there are a lot of NFT artists there, a lot of NFT producers and creators, and we in the .validators Alliance discussed with them that maybe they would like to run their nodes also for the ParisDOT community. So this is some way to give those communities the opportunity to build their treasuries, build their funds, and establish their organizations with some incentives in that. And thanks to that, those communities can like develop themselves, not relying on any other funds, and then can build their treasuries. So this is also very good way to incentivize building the communities and build the communities around the summer.
Yeah, that's what we are doing actually. That was pretty much of a cool experiment, I have to say, on the, for example, Shiden collator of the Chaos DAO. So yeah, basically I've like initiated the project, and now more members are involved, and so several members joined and pulled all together. To go around. I think I don't even charge anything for the infra. I put but that's really interesting to have some common decisions that are made, making a vote about how should we use these funds. Should we share the revenue, or should we use the protocol, because Shiden has dApp staking, and so should we dApp stake, and support also the network in another way. These are like really experiments that are worth trying. It doesn't mean it will succeed. Some of them are just, are just born to be doomed. But it's worth trying, because from this you will see amazing thing emerging, I think. Yeah.
And it's like building some better world or better future, I don't know how to say it, because, for example, we run our nodes, like each one of us run the individual nodes, but we also have the collator nodes for dot validators alliance as an instance. And for example, from those rewards we get to the dot validators alliance nodes, we were supporting sending funds to the Ukraine, like donations. So this is really a good way to establish some great initiatives in the .sama and try to, you know, build this ecosystem with the values we would like to really bring in and to differentiate our ecosystem from, like, you know, a real financial world.
Yeah, I have to say, even just being there, because this is treasury funded, you know, to sponsor the event and to make it possible actually here. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say kind of just in general, and I made kind of a post about this a while ago, but like the treasury is kind of this just like very powerful tool that's like currently being a bit underutilized. Currently, I think it's like the Polkadot on-chain treasury is like one of the top 5 largest like treasuries of like any like crypto project. And the mechanisms by which this treasury works is that like if a certain amount of funds don't get spent like per kind of time period, a bunch of it will like a portion of it gets burned. And so right now there's like a lot of DOT and KSM being burned every however much time kind of that is for. And partly that mechanism is there just to be able to kind of like have a bit of like spend pressure. But currently it's like not actually being used as much, I would say. And so I would just kind of like as a call to action, I would definitely encourage like a lot of people, if they're just like interested in just like working on like any projects, or if they're like even just interested in running any kinds of like infrastructure, like make a treasury proposal for this, like try and kind of like have things be more kind of like self-sustaining in the sense of like have this be kind of like funded by the community and funded kind of like by these on-chain mechanisms, just because like these are kind of like very powerful coordination mechanisms that I don't think we've kind of like seen utilized to their full potential. And I think kind of like as a good kind of part of this is right now Polkadot and Kusama are moving to this new like governance V2 thing, and this kind of changes some of the mechanisms by which the treasury operates, because right now it's currently the council is kind of like the gatekeepers of this, and it's just like coordinating this between like 12, 18 members is like it's not as fluid as it kind of could be. And kind of this new model is kind of everyone in the community can like vote on these. It's not just kind of like a small subset of individuals. And so to me, this is also going to be more important, especially for validators as well, to just participate in the governance aspect of this, just to facilitate a lot more of these things actually kind of like coming to fruition. And so I'd be curious, has anyone here seen kind of like, even in perhaps like other ecosystems, like any mechanisms by which kind of like public goods has been kind of like extremely successful in actually facilitating a bunch of like things being built?
Well, Gitcoin comes to mind with the you know, like quadratic contribution periods that they have. That funds a lot of stuff really well. There are definitely ways to optimize it, but I think being more liberal with the money is definitely one of them. We just discussed this morning some problems with just generally marketing and treasury spending here in Polkadot's ecosystem, and everybody was in agreement that it's currently a little bit difficult to get that money out of the treasury. There's a lot of back and forth and kind of this semi-bureaucracy going on where, you know, generally the crypto treasuries of other projects are, you know, you just knock on their door and they just throw a bag of money in your face.